Well, hello and welcome to the Charles Cook Podcast. The focus of this podcast is on state and local issues here in the state of Tennessee. And if anybody's followed what's went on in the last three, or I would say even longer than that, 2016, you can even go further and back than that if you want to. But we have issues with election, not only in Tennessee, but throughout the country. So today I have Kathy Harms with the TennesseeFairElections.org on to talk about what's happening here in Tennessee, what people need to be concerned with here in Tennessee. She's got a fantastic presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to Kathy. Kathy, welcome. Let you take over here, and when you want to start driving the screen, just take off and do what you need to do.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so very much. I will be speaking tonight on a part of elections that a lot of people don't think about. Everybody jumps right to the machines, which are unagreeable. I think we all agree that there's an issue with how we conduct our elections, how we administer them at the local level. However, there are bigger issues too that happen if you back up the truck a little bit. Who's influencing and making those things happen? Tennessee Fair Elections started about a year and a half ago. Andrea Gomez from Citizens Renewing America approached me to help get it kind of kicked off. I've been involved in election integrity since 2020, but we partnered with the Election Integrity Network, which is Cleta Mitchell's organization that she started with Jim Dement and CPI several years ago. Cleta Mitchell's an attorney. She handled a lot of cases. I really got to know her during the Lois Lerner IRS scandal. And she is just a phenomenal woman who is a warrior for election integrity. She brought this election integrity EIN group together to start state coalitions around the country. Over half of the states are members of this. And we meet not just with each other, with national working groups. We also do things with all of the major conservative think tanks, Heritage, Capital Research, Honest Elections Project. The list goes on, including the RNC. So the work that you're going to see today from me is a compilation of things that we learned at a global level, a high-flying level of what goes on in elections, and then how we as an organization and a coalition in the state of Tennessee, working with our partners in counties around the state, have been able to research what we see nationally, because you have to trickle these things down and atomize it to see, is it really happening in the state of Tennessee? Because you often hear everything is good here. Tennessee doesn't have any problems. That is the common thread. We were number one with Heritage. Well, that is a misnomer. And I know that Trey Hargett gets a little irritated with me for saying that, but that was only looking at a few specific laws. And many, many things have changed that we need to still improve after 2020. And so this is going to be a look at some of the things that people haven't really been looking at. And I will recommend that even Lara Logan today testified in Ron Johnson's hearing on the media and censorship. And the interesting thing is she hit on exactly what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. So without any further introduction, I'm going to pull up my screen, see if I can share it here with you all.
One question.
Sure.
That is the same Laura Logan who was a international correspondent for CBS News, correct?
Correct. And she was testified today about media censorship, and her story is compelling. She went through, with the horrors of war. She went through, I don't even want to talk about it, what she went through in Egypt. Right. And so what she testified to was really getting at who's really running the show around here, who is really influencing what happens in our country. And so who is that? Who are the real influencers? And I'm assuming that you can see that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Oops, let me back it up. So who are they? The people who are really influencing our elections, which if you want to know why we have machines and you want to know why we conduct elections the way we do, you have to know who's driving that message and that narrative. Well, these are creators of highly complex and costly electoral systems. They're elitist. They suppress the voice of the people. We haven't hardly made a dent, no matter how much citizens have been screaming. They want hand-marked paper ballots. They want hand counts. Why isn't that happening? Well, we have a billion-dollar industry of really these complex organizations, and we should care because, as Louis Brandeis said, the most important office and the one which all of us can and should fill is that of the private citizen. We have to always remember that we are self-governing, and unless we decide that we want to become a part of the solution, we will only be a part of the problem. So what did we find out? We have done a lot of extensive work on the national level, looking at an entire network of non-government organizations, or I call them the NGO. Years ago, I listened to Trevor Loudon years ago, and he warned everyone, he's from New Zealand, he lives in Florida now, that the NGO would be bigger than some countries. And if you've ever heard of Vanguard, or if you've ever heard of BlackRock, you will understand what I'm talking about. They are bigger than some countries. How is that affecting elections? And why is it important to you in the state of Tennessee? Well, these groups are highly financed. They are very sophisticated. They're agenda driven. They know what they want to do. They have FOIA immunity, meaning you can't get public records requests from a nonprofit, these non-GOs, because they're not government orgs. They are non-competitive in their influence. They drive an agenda for one group of people, so there's no competition to them. And with that high finance, big money that bankrolls them, it makes it very difficult for anyone else to enter the playing field. And the most important thing to know is they have alliances with the government at the local, state, and federal levels. This is not just Tennessee, it's across the country, but Tennessee is affected. We did our research on some of these at the national level of how they control elections. You saw in the surprise in Colorado, Trump was removed from the ballot. There was an entire article done on how tax-exempt nonprofits skirt the law to turn out the Democrat base in elections. You heard Charles Schwab say at the World Economic Forum, we don't even need elections. Technology can tell us how people are going to vote, so we don't even need them. You have Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, say he is linked to so many portals for these nonprofits. And then there was how charities are secretly helping to win elections. These are generally tax-exempt nonprofit organizations. That's what these NGOs are. So they kind of run under the radar. They're not able to be FOIA'd, and the money trail is incredible. So what is that money trail? If you look at this little web that I have, and this is really pretty rudimentary, you'll see Arabella. This last week, if you had been paying attention to the Epoch Times, they had a big article just on Arabella and all of these funds that they have, all of the money that flows. This is billions of dollars I'm talking about. They then get this money and they siphon it out to different funds like the New Venture Fund, the Hopewell Fund, the 1630 Fund. We've done entire charts to see what do these people spend their money on. They spend it on things like mail-in ballots, pushing for that, same-day registration, no voter ID. You go on and on and on. They control the messaging. They've got a new message out there called HITS, that people like you and I are threats to election, that we harass, intimidate, and threaten poll workers. We have done FOIAs across this country, and we can't find any examples of this. Any example that there ever was, I think there's one that's ever been prosecuted. But it's a talking point, and so they control not just how elections are run, they're controlling the narrative. Then you know these other people, you know Bill Gates and his son, you know the Gateses, the Rockefeller Foundation, Act Blue, and then Ford Foundation. But at the very bottom, what I have in yellow, I want you to look at real closely, because we've discovered that there are government grants that are being given to create, in some cases, these nonprofits, or at least to support them. A few that have been created one is called CIS, and many of you may have heard of it. It's the Center for Internet Security. It was pretty well funded by CISA, which is an arm of our DHS, the Center for Internet Cybersecurity and Internet Security Agency. And they use them to censor us. This is a big
Right.
investigation that's going on. Representative Mark Green is involved with this investigation, and so is Representative Dan Bishop from North Carolina. And EIP, the Election Integrity Partnership, that's a huge nonprofit that was really created whole cloth by the federal government. So you have the federal government shaking hands here with these nonprofits, and they're giving them money. And so your taxpayer money in many, many cases is funding a lot of this activity, but you never know about it because you can't FOIA these people.
Quick question. On your previous screen there, you have Ford Foundation. Now, is that with Ford Motor Company?
Yeah, well, the Ford Motor Company has a foundation separate from Ford itself. That's been around a very long
Right.
time. But they do, it's like the Rockefeller Foundation.
Right.
They fund a lot of these groups. So that's why they're on that. And of course, we just gave $1 billion to Ford
Right.
to come to the state of Tennessee. And we haven't even seen the real bill for that and the cost that's going to have on our communities yet.
Yep. That's why I wanted to ask the question. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So how does this all work? Well, you have the election power elites, and that lacks any kind of risk assessment. They don't tell us what's going on. And I'm going to start with the federal government at the federal level. Over here on the far left of the screen, you have the government, which is run by the EAC. This was created after the 2000 election. It's called the Election Assistance Commission. And that was devised after 2000 to help have better systems that run our election. Underneath them, you have CISA that I talked about. That's an arm of the DHS. CISA has only been around since 2017, when Obama decided that all of our election equipment would become critical infrastructure. That should have been a warning to us right there. And then you have the Department of Justice that's involved in a lot of this. So they drive the process. They create the messaging on who is going to be in the space of elections. So what they do is, if you look at the top one, you have a government created or approved partnership that drives training, how our election officers are trained, the process, the registration. On the bottom, you'll see that also drives technology, the process of cyber mitigation, censorship complex, no hand-marked paper ballots for simpler operations. The EAC, who is supposed to be watching over these things, has never advocated for a secure system like hand-marked paper ballots. Instead, they have a very cozy relationship, as you can see, with the vendors, which are not government. And we all complain that we can't find out how these machines work because it's proprietary, and they wouldn't be here if the EAC wasn't passing them off as a system that is approved. They get them tested supposedly, but we all know that testing is rudimentary, and it doesn't tell us what's going to happen on the ground. You can test anything in a lab, but it's like you test you might have tested your Ford Ranger or some car in a lab, but that's not the car that you're going to buy. That's not the car that you're going to be getting behind the wheel in. So it's kind of a false sense of security. Then when you get into these other ones above there, the government partnered NGOs, these are a whole nother set of people that nobody ever looks at. These are NGOs like you'll see one, there's the Election Group, the U.S. Alliance for Election Excellence, the Center for Internet Security, the Bipartisan Policy Center. What do these people do, the League of Women Voters, and what do they have to do with Tennessee? They have tons of organizations like these that are conducting conferences all over the country, telling our people what they consider to be the best practices. Well, not one of these is a conservative group. The U.S. Alliance for Election Excellence was created by the Zuckerbergs, and I don't think I can tell you much more. They have funded like $80 million to go in and get inside and find out what's going on in our election offices, telling us about the HITS thing, like they're telling these people they're under threat. They are teaching them how to target different groups. The Get Out the Vote is a good example. In the federal government in 2000, this other organization was created called HAVA. It was an act, actually, the Help America Vote Act. And in the Help America Vote Act, HAVA, in there, it was determined that government should never be involved in Get Out the Vote, You couldn't use HAVA funds for get out the vote or for voter registration. And the reason was they said it was political activity. Well, these conferences, they're telling them to put all of their work as election officials into voter registration and get out the vote. And then when they do that, they have them partner with them as third parties to go out and do voter registration. And they affect the administration and the policy at the state level with the Secretary of States, the state administration level, and all the way down into your county. I will tell you that they will probably, somebody in your most election offices in the state of Tennessee has had some interaction with the election group or the election center, the League of Women Voters. These are all left-leaning organizations that are very, very active in helping in determining how to train election workers. That is not a good idea. As a matter of fact, just this past weekend, the election center was in Nashville conducting a training in Nashville for election workers. Who thinks that's a good idea? So that's kind of a big picture. So you have the government on one side, partners with these groups. A lot of them get federal or state money. Most of it's federal money. They work with the vendors on the bottom, which are the machines that everybody hates. But then that big group at the top that's just filled with groups that are in the state of Tennessee. And then they all funnel down into how do we administer. And I'm going to show you a picture about that. The ones in Tennessee, who are the ones that are working it? We know these are in Tennessee. You have a group called Organized Tennessee. That's part of Civic Nation Tennessee. You have the Center for Election Integrity. That's in here. You have the Center for Tech and Civic Life through the U.S. Alliance on Elections. That's Zuckerberg. The election group we know is here. Actually, in my county in the last week, our election office wanted to give the election group, which is a for-profit group, $100,000 in a contract to do an investigation on hand-marked paper ballots. First of all, we don't need an investigation. We have counties in the state of Tennessee doing this. Murray County, just south of us, uses a hand-marked paper ballot. And that group was it was so close, except that the county commission didn't grant the money at the meeting, but it's going to come back up in March. Then you have the Audacious Project. These are all just different groups. Rock the Vote, many of you may have heard of. Yes. The Democracy Fund, the Center for Civic Justice. That's an arm of Civic TN. Oops. Nope. Is that me? Oh, sorry. Can you hear that? I hope not. We have something going. There we go. Center for Civic Justice is an arm of the Civic TN. And what that is if they see something and when they bring poll workers in and they are watchers and they see a problem, and they will call the Center for Civic Justice in DC, and they've got a team of attorneys to swarm us if they think they need to. And then again, the election center that I just told you was just here last weekend.
Yeah.
So how do those partnerships and money work I'll give you a little chart here. So you have these government and NGOs, they're partners, right? We know this for a fact at the federal level that these things have been, they've partnered. We have our local people thinking there's no trouble with this, so they partner with them. What have they created? They created the censorship complex, the Lara Logan video, if you want to watch that talks about it at the media. You've all heard of dis, and malinformation. They're at it again, trying to push that narrative going into the 2024 election and on election security. They are creating a new constituent of voters. When they go out and they're registering people to vote, they've got a target of people they're looking for. They're looking for single moms, younger people, and ethnic minorities. They're targeting these groups. They use a complex workforce that has no transparency. So you guys are probably not even aware that they're working in your county, and they very well could be. And then they construct new processes that create new vulnerabilities. And I'll give you a good example. You've all heard of maybe the Vote Center. Only 7 counties in Tennessee are currently using them. But the Vote Center takes the voting out of the precinct, and it puts all the reliance on the issue of having to use e-poll books and technology. You can't simplify anything once it gets to the Vote Center. And that is a new vulnerability. Mail-in ballots, we all have heard of that all over the country. And they even have done things where they get on our websites and they're advertising some of the things that they're advocating for. And I'm going to get to that in a minute because you're going to be shocked. So
Okay.
these
You
so
said there was 7 counties in Tennessee that they're working in.
that have vote centers that
Okay.
have vote centers.
Do you know which
But
counties those are?
well, I know Rutherford, Williamson, Davidson. I'm not sure about Shelby. I can't, and they just put in, I think Clay and was it Clay and Henry last year? But we are really limited. We're only 7 out of 95, and we're trying to keep that cancer from spreading across the state. And we're trying to pull back and get those 7 counties to go back to precinct only voting. The further you take a voter away from their precinct, the more vulnerabilities that you create in order for that ballot to get processed. You have to have a machine to tell you what kind of ballot they need. We've had problems right now in an election in Williamson County, 2 separate problems. One was that there were candidates not even put on the ballot in their district. And then there was a problem just this last week we found out about where people were being given the wrong ballot. It's because they're not in their precinct. And so you have to have a machine generate the information to tell them where to go vote. And if the machine is wrong, or because of human error, because you have people involved, then you're going to get more vulnerability. So we are advocates of keeping it in the precinct with a hand marked paper ballot that is secure and not using vote centers. Right now, it's illegal to hand count in the state of Tennessee. That's a law that would have to be changed, but it's not illegal to do a hand marked paper ballot. There are many counties that still do it. Obion, Benton, Murray County does a hand marked paper ballot. And there's no reason why, if we're voting in precincts, we can't do that. We do not need the machine. And the people who are running all of this and advocating are CISA, CIS, the EIP. I mean, these are all acronyms, but they've all had scandals. Just those 3 right there have had major national scandals, but they're still running in business like they haven't missed a beat. What do? They data mine. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. They are replacing the average citizen administrator. When you get into these complex systems, your normal person like you and I, like we were talking before this, technology is not our thing. A lot of people who run elections, technology is not their thing. We're making it difficult. If they're getting frustrated and don't want to do the job anymore, I cannot blame them, because when an election is over, they should be able to turn out the lights and be confident that it went the way they thought it was going to go, not that it was hidden behind black box technology and something screwy went on because they couldn't understand it. Just like what happened here on Saturday in Williamson County, where people got the wrong ballot. That shouldn't have to happen. I feel for these election administrators, but these complex systems are designed to replace the people we currently have. And I'm going to tell you what the name of the organization that's doing just that. They all have their little niche thing they work on. So, like I said, some are on mail-in ballots, some are on getting rid of voter ID, some want same-day voter registration, some want to create what they call the new election workforce advisory council. They want to just change everybody. So that's a problem. That is a real problem. I'd rather have people who've done it for years, that know my county, know my precincts. I trust those people. I don't trust the systems. They outsource the technology. They have to, because people don't know how to do it. And they limit the access. So they're not transparent, and we can never get to independent audits with a system like this. And people are frustrated. But again, why can't you change it? You have to go back to the people who are influencing this, government and non-government partnerships. What have we found out specifically in addition to what, so that's a big picture. Let me bring it right down to a county level. We found that they have an explicit goal to target just very specific voters. This is a quote from an election administrator in the state of Tennessee. I won't out their county, but this is what this person said. The NGO, and I won't tell you the name of it, has a grant funding available to them this is what she actually said, to do a lot of the things that we as a government entity cannot do. They can target mailings. They can do targeted text. We have to treat every voter in the same class, the same way. So I would have to mail to all of the 18-year-olds. I couldn't just mail the ones in, and she cites a specific area of the county. She says they can do targeting, they can target groups. That right there is against the law. We saw in Wisconsin, the Zuck Bucks, when they came in Wisconsin in 2020, they targeted neighborhoods. They were non-competitive. They couldn't they gave money to the election administrators to do this. In the state of Tennessee, we passed legislation so that they can't take money in your election office. There's nothing we have in the law right now that says, as an election official, I can't join one of these groups and hire them to do what this election administrator says this group does. This group does things like they just recently, in the last few weeks, had since Christmas, I'll name 3 things I found on their web that on the election commission office, they allowed this third party to put up. One was they told them how they could get around our absentee ballot. You know how if you want an absentee ballot in Tennessee, you have to have a reason.
Right.
They gave them every loophole you can think of not to have to give that reason. Just in the last week, they had up on that website how to get around voter ID. You would think that, I mean, if this stuff starts my hair on fire, that we would want a non-government organization allowed to put this on a website of a local county election commission. But I can tell you it's there.
Wow.
Wow. It's pretty wild, huh?
Yeah.
So now, what else have we found? I told you a little bit about the Election Integrity Network in our group. That's Tennessee Fair Elections. Some of our research. Well, we're researching and we find out that this group called the Bipartisan Policy Center is working with the election group, which I talked about a few minutes ago. And they announced that they've got a new consulting partnership and they're going to form what's called the Election Workforce Advisory Council to get to that more experienced officials to deal with new challenges that require new competencies. Well, I'm sorry. What an insult to the people who work on our elections right now. They're competent if they weren't being hamstrung by these systems, but they don't want to simplify anything. They want to make it more complicated. And guess we have one of our very own election administrators from Wilson County. She is one of their current election administrators. She is actually a part of this. There's nothing in our law that says our election administrators can't join these groups. She has been recognized by this organization to be so great that they want to put her on this group. I don't have anything against this individual. I think she's a fine administrator. But when I challenged this to our Secretary of State's office, they said, well, wouldn't you want our people to be there? I asked the question, when you send your kid, you raise your child conservative, you send them to a far left college and they come back at Thanksgiving and everything you've ever taught them has been flipped upside down. That's what's going to happen. You cannot send your kids to Rome and expect them not to become Romans. We can't expect to send our election officials to these organizations and not expect them to come back thinking like them. And I think this is something we need to address, and we are addressing it. One other thing I want to tell you about, because this one we are addressing, and I will tell you we have some good news on this one. We came across this situation. We found out that the All In Campus Democracy Challenge, which is one of these big groups that has lots of money, they go on college campuses and they do voter registration. And this is how it kind of works. They go to the college, they say, we're going to do this National Study of Learning Voting Engagement, NSLVE. We're going to do this and we're going to give you money, Mr. College Administrator, to let us come in and do this. The college administrator takes the funding because they're going to do all the work, but they sign forms. You know, you enter a contract, you sign forms. One of the forms they've been signing is a ability for this group to take the data of every student in that college and take it, and they send it to this group called Catalyst, which is run by Democrats and progressive organizations, and this is their own words, with the goal of a variety of issues and advocates of organizers, pollsters, analysts, consultants, campaigners, researchers, and more. So what we found, these are some of the colleges in the state of Tennessee whose data has been, we call it data mining. These groups went in, they got the data, they sent it through Tufts University and Catalyst got it. And remember what Obama said, data is everything. When he went in to run, he was the first one who used data. If every student, whether they're participating in this program or not, has their data taken away and given to a third party that's non-competitive, nobody else has access to it. Republicans, independents, nobody, just these Democrats. Well, we went after this when we found out about it. There was a woman in Pennsylvania who did a white paper on this for the country. She identified these for us and gave it to us. And she showed us that what they do is they target these students. It's private data that's not available to other campaigns. Once, this is the importance of the data, once they get it, these kids are getting text messages, they're getting emails, they're getting phone calls, they're getting groomed. They're getting groomed with messages to tell them how to vote, who to vote for, convincing them what the issues are. They're basically campaigning and politically grooming. And once they have that done, when it comes time to vote, they pinpoint their contact with details and targeting, and they get them to the polls. We know this is happening. It's happening all over the country, and it's happening in the state of Tennessee. So we decided to do something about it. I've got a few good stories at the end here. So don't go jump off the roof yet. I think I'll give you something to be happy about. So the Tennessee code, though, when we got into this, we thought, well, how hard can it be to change this stuff, right? Well, we found out that 99% of our rules, because you have laws that get passed, right?
Right.
Then you have rules that tell you how to enforce those laws. Well, we haven't had an update on most of our administrative rules in the state of Tennessee since 1996, I think it is. That's kind of scary. How many times have the machines changed since 1996? So we're trying to figure out things that we have found that are happening that have nothing to do with the NGOs, but it has to do with the systems. We found that early votes are sometimes being tabulated on election day hours before the polls are closed. Who thinks that's a good idea? 50 to 80% of our voting is done early. If somebody knows those totals at 3:00 in the afternoon on election day, you don't think that might be a problem? That's a problem.
Yeah.
We found out that these violations happen and there's not consequences. Because there's no enforcement mechanism. Then we found remember those vote centers I don't like? We found that where you put a vote center can affect the outcome of an election, because if you don't put them equally, when you have to vote in a precinct, everybody gets to vote near the house or their apartment or wherever they live. If you're in a vote center and my whole part of the county doesn't have a vote center, I can't vote, right? I have to drive
Right.
way further. So that is a problem. And then we've also lastly found that early voting ballots can get inserted after the polls are closed, after the public notice. So we're tracking these other issues down, but they're all related to what I'm talking to you about today, because these are all things that are affected by the non-government organizations that are allowed into our offices, into our systems, and there's no transparency on how do these systems work. So what have we done? We've actually done something good. We found out about this college data mining. I was doing this presentation and I found out that in the audience afterwards, there was a Board of Regent member for the state of Tennessee. He came up to me and said, the government appointed me, and I'm kind of concerned about what you said. So I said, don't take my word for it. I sent him the white papers. He did his own investigations. He got a hold of the chancellor and the general counsel, who then contacted the colleges and TCATs, and they said that these institutions were instructed to cease providing any student data. They went after this, and that's great. That's
great.
good news. But it's only the first hurdle. It still requires legislative oversight, and there is legislation that Representative Tim Rudd from Rutherford County, we are very grateful to him. He ran legislation, it got through the subcommittee in education last week to stop this, because we need a law to say you can't do it. First of all, it's a violation of federal law, we believe, taking that data from the kids. But we need legislative oversight. We're dealing with it at the college level, but I'm sorry to say that it's happening at the high school level. And we think that about 47% of all high school kids' data gets mined by these groups that go in to look to see who's eligible to vote. You hear it all the time that they're in the schools. And the Department of Education today came out with a toolkit encouraging more of this activity. So we're going to have to get after the high schools too. What are we doing about the hand-marked paper ballot? This is another success story in Murray County. They decided they want a secure hand-marked paper ballot. They have determined they will not go to vote centers. They're going to stay in a precinct. That means they don't have to use the e-poll book, which puts all your voter information on a network. They are going to put up signs because we're all very concerned about, we are all border states now with the citizenship. So they're putting up signs to remind anybody that comes in that it's a violation of the law in the state of Tennessee to vote if you're not a citizen. And post-election, they're going to have machine reports. They're asking that every single function that the tabulator does will have a human readable report in order to be able to audit what happened. And that's another success story. So this didn't require any legislation. It didn't require permission from our state government. They're using exactly the ballot that is used in absentee ballot voting if they have to. And all of this can be done. It does not require any extra work as far as legislation. This is legal. So what else are we needing to do? Okay, we're almost at the end here. We need the Tennessee General Assembly to address these third parties. We have to have some help. We can't allow this to be going on in our state, and we can't pretend it's not. I came across in the last week or so a new website called proudvoter.org, and it is a list of all of the organizations that are in the state of Tennessee. I mean, I found it after I did this presentation. So they are here. I've passed it on. So we want them to get rid of the ability for our administration to be affected. We want to stop all this data mining and political grooming. We want to make sure that the legislative lobbying by these groups gets reined in. We want to make sure that anybody who's involved in our election, I don't care who it is, it should all be transparent. It should all be subject to FOIAs. There should be public post-election reports and audits so we have confidence in our elections. And we have to do more to make sure that only citizens are voting in our elections. And we have federal engagement. We've been working and asking Mark Green for help and Representative Dan Bishop on all of the great work they've done on this, but we need our Tennessee General Assembly to do more. So we have this legislation filed. It is on the third-party voter registration. That legislation is HB 1955 and SB 2586. It's run by Representative Rudd and Senator Taylor. We're trying to put guardrails around the third-party voter registration so they can't be doing this data mining. And we want to prohibit the election commissioners' administrative associations that are independent of the General Assembly's oversight. And that is a bill that's being run by Representative Rudd and Joey Hensley. It's HB 1799. HB 1799 and SB 1706. Additional things we want to work on are citizenship voting. We want ID training. We want our poll workers to be trained, because right now on the license of a Tennessee license, if you're not a citizen, it says temporary license. We want to train people to look for that. Representative Jody Barrett has legislation to tighten that up. And he also has legislation to make sure that those temporary voter or driver's licenses are they're good right now, I think, for 8 years. I think he's trying to get that down to 2. We want transparency. We want independent audits and public accountability. We want to protect our poll watchers. We don't like it that we're hearing this negative, false narrative that says that we're harassing and intimidating and threatening. I don't know one person, not even the most ardent activist in the state of Tennessee, does not do that. They want to be able to be at the polls because we need eyes on every ballot. And we want precinct voting. We want to secure the access to the polls and the purity of the ballot box. So what can you all do? Well, we want you to be educated. If you want, you can join Tennessee Fair Elections. We are a coalition across the state in many, many counties. We have a Zoom call every Friday morning at noon Eastern, 11 Central, where we go over all of this, because I know tonight you might be thinking that you're drinking from a fire hose, and you are. Elections are complicated. There are many more moving parts than people realize. We do not want to fight our government. We want to work with our government. I don't consider us adversaries. I consider ourselves to be we are the citizens in self-governing, and we need to be able to redress our government when we see a problem and work it through with them. So if you join us, you can talk to your legislators and you'll be as informed as I am. And then use reliable sources. I don't come to you tonight with half-baked newspaper articles. I come to you tonight with well-done research that I've received through this coalition and the national people that have worked on this with sound data. And if you don't do anything else, if you say, I can't handle all of this, please, please, please be a poll watcher. We conduct Zoom training all the time. Be a poll watcher. We need eyes everywhere. When we found the problems in Williamson County with this recent election, we found a recent problem Saturday. Well, the poll worker let the poll watcher on Saturday know that it happened on Friday. Unfortunately, we didn't have a poll watcher there on Friday. We don't know if this was metastasized all across the county. We need people to be there, because when there is an issue, we have a new app. It's called Votify Now. People can, whether you're a citizen at the polls and you see something that you don't understand, whether you are a candidate, you're a representative of a political party, you can go to the Votify Now app and report it. And then we have a record across the state. If you don't want to be a poll watcher, because that's a volunteer, you can be a poll worker. You don't get paid. You're not going to retire on a poll worker's salary, but you can be a poll worker, which is even better, because then you're behind the scenes and you know how everything is working. We need to be engaged. One of the big complaints I get is we don't have enough poll watchers and poll workers to work at the polls. I believe that we can step it up and do a job that we need to do, because I have not heard more complaints about anything since COVID except elections. And it's the number one issue with the RNC on every major poll. People don't have confidence. If you want to have confidence, we need your help. So if you can become a poll watcher, that's a minimum thing that I think anybody can do. And if you want to do more, if you want to help clean voter rolls, if you're interested in the technology piece or the audit piece or any of these things, we're more than happy to have you on board. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. It's a lot of information, but again, Lara Logan today really confirmed this report that I'm giving you on these non-government organizations. And what I told you today about elections, whether it's elections, immigration, education, healthcare, we've got to find out who are the influencers running behind the scenes. It's like a shadow government is what Trevor Loudon talks about. And so we can put a stop to that by just being engaged. And I don't think that a lot of our legislators are nefarious, but I don't know that they really understand it either. This is an area that we haven't really talked about.
Well, just as I interviewed Andy Roth with the Freedom
Freedom
Caucus. And, you know, a lot of people don't understand that our legislators, especially at the state level, are part time. They have no staff like federal representatives or senators. They'll have an assistant, you know, there in the office. That's it. They don't have a lot of time to do a lot of research and have people to research for them on all of these bills that come up. And so it's very difficult to be that effective, you know, on a lot of these issues. So you listed some of the bills that have been filed and put forth by Rudd, and Representative Rudd and a couple of the other ones. Has any of those went to committee yet? What's that process looking like right now?
All right, we need help on getting these things put through. The best one that's moved so far is the one on the data mining on the college campuses. I told you that went through committee last week because it went through education. What we're finding is some pushback on the other two that I've considered to be really key is the third-party voter registration and the one on the NGOs training our people. The one on registration is HB 1955, and the one on the training is HB 1799. And I'm going to tell you what the problem is. The first one on voter registration, the pushback I got was that it was going to be litigated. That, oh no, they're going to come at us, all these, third parties, and they're going to sue us. The good news is this particular law this legislation that's being run is modeled after a bill that was in Florida. There's SB 90 in Florida. It was sued. They were sued. It was litigated, and I'm here to report tonight that the very last piece of that litigation came through with flying colors in the 11th District Court last week. So there is really no reason not to run this. Sometimes you hear, well, we're going to be sued. We can't do this. Well, that made it through with flying colors in Florida. If Florida can do it, we can do it. So that one, I hope, cleared a hurdle. The second one is the training, HB 1799. The pushback on that one, I don't quite understand. And I'm hearing things, well, election administrators like to go to conferences and, they like to travel. But when you have an IT person come back from Salt Lake City after going to a training and telling his election commission that it's illegal for you or I to talk about election integrity, and maybe somebody won't vote. And if they didn't vote because we had issues that we were talking about, that was against the law. That's a violation of our free speech. I mean, these people are coming back believing this stuff is true, that they're believing it's okay to target. They're learning these things. And so there was an amendment I'm pushing to be put on the bill. The bill that was originally filed gives all of the approval to the Secretary of State. Well, okay, we'll do it so that Secretary of State has to approve of these groups. The problem is the Secretary of State is approving of these groups. And our Secretary of State is not elected. So unless there's a lot of oversight, like you just said, they don't have time to go ask the Secretary of State every single person they're dealing with. So Heritage Action, along with Honest Election Project, came up with a bill, a model that we are asking to be placed on that bill as an amendment. Senator Joey Hensley in the Senate is he's already filed it. It's got to be accepted in the committee. But in the House, we have to get that amendment put on, because that amendment puts restrictions on these groups in order for them, because honestly, nobody should be training your election officials except the state, not even conservatives. I'm all about that. Let no conservatives, no progressives. It is the job of the Secretary of State and the State Coordinator of Election to train and develop our election officials, nobody else. I'm not saying they can't get materials, but at least if you put restrictions, then if you have a problem, you know where the problem lies. And then it also tells them that you cannot do it privately either. If you're an election official, you can't. We said they couldn't take this money, but we didn't say they couldn't spend the money on these groups.
Right.
We don't want that money. We don't want to feed the coffers of any of these other groups, including conservative groups. So we need help to get this bill passed. I'll be up in Cordell Hall. Anybody who wants to come along. The bill is not calendared yet, which is good news for us, but it should be on the calendar next week.
Okay. So I lost my train of thought there for a minute. So looking at these, what people need to understand is this is not just about presidential elections. This is about congressional elections in certain areas. All these districts. It's about county elections. It's about city elections. Anything that can be manipulated to affect an election turnout or the results, it's not just about Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
Exactly right.
And so people need to understand that it's about who may be running your city for the next 4 years, who may be the mayor of your county for the next 4 years, who may be the sheriff of your county, the chief law enforcement officer of your county for the next 4 years. People need to understand that, and
Exactly.
that's why it's important.
It is because George Soros, we all know, spent an enormous amount of money putting DAs in across the country. And you all know that Shelby County right now has got a crime spree going on like crazy because the DA is not prosecuting. They're letting these guys out of jail. We don't want to keep playing catch up. We're very grateful for Senator Brent Taylor that's fighting for Memphis. But a pastor was just killed, I think, yesterday for trying to stop some kids from in Memphis from trying to stop them from stealing a parishioner's car, and he got killed. So we have to stop this and on every level. So we need to be able to have free and fair elections so that your DA, whether it's your DA, your dog catcher, whoever it is that's elected, whatever elected position, that there's election integrity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like you said, that was a lot of information, but it's good information, and that's why I wanted to have you on so folks could see it. I thought you done a fantastic job in Sevierville showing this stuff, and I wanted to share it with people so they could see and understand. Uh, you know, this is not just coming from a certain group in Washington. You know, and let's just be frank. I mean, be clear here. This is not just Democrats that do this. This can be done by Republicans as well. When you get into primaries and stuff, this stuff is shady, and so we need to understand this. You want fair elections for everyone, not just one certain party. And people need to understand that. Oh, they're afraid the Democrats are going to win. No, I mean, it's about making sure that, you know, a primary winner is going to win,
Mhm,
or an at large city council race is legit,
mhm,
where you have two or three candidates running in it. You know, so it gets down even to the school board.
mhm.
So I appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us and everything. And hopefully folks will share this and watch it and get a better understanding when people talk about fair elections or election integrity, that it's more than just, uh, you know, as people on our side usually think it's the Democrats or progressives. It can be anybody.
Exactly. Exactly. And if you need more information, we have tons of articles on tnfairelections.org. We've got all these bills are on tnfairelections.org. We'll have the talking points. If you want to do it, you can just ask a couple questions. You can say, will you support only our Secretary of State training our people? What are you doing to make sure that only citizens are voting? Just a few simple questions, but all of your backup information is on that website. You're welcome to use whatever you need. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, all right. So with that, we'll do you have anything else you want to add before we shut this off?
I just want to say thank you to everyone in the state of Tennessee. You guys rock. You really have been great patriots, and God bless you. And pray for our county. Pray for your county. Pray for your state, and pray for our country. We need it.
Big
Thank you.
time. We are a lot of evil going on. We're in a spiritual, I believe, a spiritual
Mhm.
attack, and we definitely need prayer,
Yes.
and we know that that works. So
God
great
bless you.
advice, Kathy, and appreciate
Bless
you coming on. Stay on the call when I end this for a few minutes. Talk to you for a minute. With that, everyone, thank you. Please share this information. It's critical that people understand what's going on in the state with the elections and all of the money and organizations that are here to try to, you know, undermine things and interfere with elections. So with that, thank you. We'll see you on the next podcast. God bless you, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.